Global energy markets were jolted after the United States announced a sudden move to restrict oil flows linked to Cuba, a decision framed as part of a renewed pressure strategy. The announcement triggered immediate uncertainty across the Caribbean, where energy systems are tightly interconnected and highly sensitive to supply disruptions. While the political intent was clear, the economic consequences began unfolding within hours rather than weeks. Cuba's dependence on imported oil has long been a structural vulnerability. Domestic production covers only a limited portion of national demand, leaving the country exposed to external shocks. Even small interruptions can cascade into electricity shortages, transportation slowdowns, and industrial disruptions. This time, the impact extended beyond Cuba's borders as regional markets reacted. Shipping companies adjusted schedules, insurers reassessed risk, and refiners began searching for alternative supply routes. Futures markets reflected heightened volatility as traders attempted to gauge how long the disruption might last. Yet, amid the uncertainty, one factor quickly emerged as stabilizing: Canada's continued presence in global oil supply chains. Canada did not announce any special measures or policy shifts. Instead, its influence came through consistency. Production levels remained steady, export commitments were maintained, and logistics operations continued without interruption. This reliability had a calming effect on markets already strained by geopolitical tension. Rather than directly supplying Cuba, Canadian oil helped balance global supply elsewhere, freeing up alternative shipments that could be redirected to regions experiencing stress. Analysts describe this as a secondary stabilizing effect, where one supplier's consistency allows the system as a whole to adapt. The distinction between political action and market response became increasingly clear. While the United States exercised authority through restriction, markets responded through reallocation. The speed of this adjustment limited the duration of severe volatility. Energy-dependent economies across the Caribbean monitored developments closely. Many operate with narrow fiscal margins, where fuel price spikes can translate quickly into inflation and public pressure. The avoidance of sustained price surges offered temporary relief. This episode highlighted a shift in how influence operates in modern energy markets. Control through policy can trigger reactions, but stability through supply shapes outcomes. Canada's role in this moment was not dramatic, yet it proved significant by reinforcing confidence at a critical time. As markets continued to recalibrate, attention turned to the broader implications of the disruption. Energy systems today are deeply interconnected, and actions targeting one country often ripple across entire regions. In this case, the Caribbean's reliance on imported fuel magnified the impact of uncertainty, even for nations not directly involved in the policy decision. Canada's position within this environment reflects decades of infrastructure development and regulatory consistency. Large-scale production capacity, established export routes, and long-term commercial relationships give Canadian oil a reputation for dependability. During periods of disruption, this reputation becomes a strategic asset. Market participants emphasize that no single supplier replaces another overnight. Instead, stability emerges through cumulative adjustments. Canadian output did not surge, nor did it require political coordination. The mere continuation of predictable supply allowed other producers to shift flows toward higher need areas. This quiet influence contrasts with traditional views of power. Rather than exerting pressure, Canada absorbed volatility. Rather than issuing statements, it delivered continuity. Over time, these characteristics shape market expectations more effectively than sudden interventions. For the United States, the episode underscored the complexity of using energy as a lever. When markets compensate efficiently, that leverage weakens. This does not mean policy lacks impact, but it does highlight limits. Political messaging surrounding decisive action often assumes direct cause and effect. Markets, however, operate through incentives rather than intent. When alternatives exist, actors respond pragmatically. Energy analysts noted that the speed of adjustment reduced the overall economic shock. Price spikes moderated faster than anticipated. Shipping routes stabilized. Contractual disputes were largely avoided. These outcomes reflected the system's ability to adapt under pressure. Within Canada, the development sparked discussion about the country's evolving role. Increased influence brings opportunity, but also scrutiny. Balancing domestic environmental goals with international demand remains a sensitive issue. Canadian officials maintained a cautious public posture. Messaging emphasized market responsibility and economic cooperation rather than geopolitical competition. This approach preserved diplomatic flexibility and avoided escalating tensions. The situation also prompted renewed interest from Latin American governments seeking supply diversification. Dependence on a narrow set of energy partners increases vulnerability. Canada's perceived neutrality enhanced its appeal. As markets stabilized, attention shifted from immediate disruption to longer term trends. Energy power is becoming less centralized. Influence now flows through reliability, scale, and trust rather than unilateral control. The longer term significance of the episode lies in what it reveals about shifting global energy dynamics. In previous decades, major powers could exert outsized influence by restricting access to resources. Today, diversified supply networks and responsive markets reduce the impact of such moves. Canada's role illustrates this transformation. Without altering policy or increasing output dramatically, it shaped outcomes simply by remaining predictable. Traders value certainty, especially during geopolitical turbulence. Reliability becomes leverage. For Cuba, the immediate challenge remains unresolved. Alternative supply routes are more complex and often more expensive. Infrastructure limitations constrain rapid adaptation. However, the broader market response prevented the disruption from escalating into a wider regional crisis. Caribbean economies benefited indirectly. Stabilized prices reduced fiscal stress and limited inflationary pressure. While energy costs remain high globally, sudden spikes were avoided. For the United States, the episode prompted internal debate. Policymakers must weigh political objectives against economic realities. When actions generate limited market disruption, their strategic effectiveness is questioned. Donald Trump's broader foreign policy narrative emphasizes strength and leverage. Energy measures are often presented as tools to assert control. Yet this case demonstrates how market systems can diffuse that control. Supporters argue that pressure operates cumulatively and symbolically. Critics counter that adaptive markets reduce tangible impact. Both views coexist, but outcomes increasingly depend on structural conditions rather than announcements. Energy companies played a critical role throughout the adjustment. Decisions by traders, shippers, and refiners determined how supply rebalanced. Governments set frameworks, but private actors executed responses. This reinforces a key reality of modern energy markets. Influence is shared. States, corporations, and financial institutions all shape outcomes, or no single actor dominates consistently. Canada's approach aligns well with this environment. By prioritizing operational continuity, it enhances long-term credibility. Over time, credibility compounds, influencing investment decisions and partnerships. The episode also highlights the quiet nature of modern power shifts. No formal alliance was announced. No public confrontation occurred. Yet perceptions changed. Countries observed who provided stability and who introduced uncertainty. These observations inform future decisions, from contract negotiations to infrastructure investment. As global energy transitions accelerate, reliability during disruption will matter even more. Suppliers that manage volatility effectively will shape markets, regardless of political rhetoric. Looking ahead, analysts expect continued diversification across energy markets. Countries exposed to sudden policy shifts are likely to seek broader partnerships. Resilience has become a strategic priority. Canada's position appears well suited to this trend. Its capacity, governance framework, and integration into global trade networks provide advantages. However, sustaining influence will require careful balancing of domestic and international priorities. Environmental considerations remain central to Canada's internal debate. Expanding influence through fossil fuel markets intersects with climate commitments. Managing this tension will define future policy choices. For the United States, the episode serves as a reminder of the constraints imposed by interconnected markets. Unilateral actions still matter, but their outcomes are shaped by global responses. Trump's emphasis on decisive measures resonates politically, yet effectiveness increasingly depends on cooperation and credibility. Markets respond to consistency more than confrontation. The Cuba-related disruption will not be the last test of energy leverage. As geopolitical competition intensifies, similar scenarios are likely. Each will offer insight into how power is exercised in practice. The lesson from this episode is not about winners or losers, but about mechanisms. Affluence today operates through supply chains, contracts, and trust. Stability becomes a form of authority. Canada did not claim control over markets. It did not issue declarations, yet its steady presence altered outcomes. This subtlety reflects a broader evolution in global economics. For smaller economies, the takeaway is clear. Diversification and adaptability reduce vulnerability. Dependence on any single source increases risk. As markets continue to evolve, energy will remain both a commodity and a strategic tool. How it is used will depend less on force and more on coordination. The immediate shock has faded, but its implications endure. Perceptions have shifted, relationships are being reassessed, oil continued to flow, prices stabilized, markets adjusted. In that adjustment, influence quietly redistributed.